Hello, this is Belinda Colleen, and I'm back today to talk a little bit about reselling as usual. The title of this video is Five Numbers All Serious Resellers Focus on Like a Hawk. Okay, it's a numbers game. You've heard people say that. And this, like any business, is a numbers game. And if you don't know certain numbers, then you're not doing your job. And if you lose sight of these numbers, then there's a great chance you really won't be able to analyze your progress, your success, see areas that you need to improve in. And some things can get out of control if you don't watch them. So I've not always been great about this. When I first started, I was not paying attention to my numbers. And I was just caught up in the excitement of it and was just running around like a chicken with my head cut off a little bit. So I do think that numbers are very, very important. And the reason I decided I wanted to talk about these is because I just was going through my numbers yesterday and saw some definite areas that I need to improve on and some areas that I have improved on, so I could feel good about that. I think it's key to watch your progress, whether you're a part-time or a full-time seller. I'm retired from the corporate world and that type of thing, and am now doing this as a part-timer. I love it. But I do take it seriously, and I do have goals for the income that I'd like to make from this. So the first number that I think you really have to focus on is the average sales price of your items. Now, this is the one that I have really started focusing on a lot more in the last 6 months, because I was selling way too many cheap items. I'd get excited. I'd think, well, gosh, this only costs $2 and I can make, and I can get $15 for it. So that's like 7 times, over 7 times what I paid for it. Well, the problem with that mindset, even though it seems good on the surface, by the time you factor out fees and you think that, you have to touch that item so many times. My cat's just jumped into my lap. So if his head pops up, don't be surprised. He wants to be part of everything I do, I think. Anyway, so I think you have to remember that, you need to focus on a certain sales price in order to make the income you want to make. And I no longer buy things that I can only sell for $15. The minimum that I want to sell for, or the minimum that I want to get, is a $20 profit. And a lot of people use that number. I mean, of course, the more the better. And I would love to make much more than that. And I'm fortunate enough that I do on a lot of items, but that's my minimum. So, and I have to remember that, that doesn't mean I'm selling things for $25. That means I need to start at like $30 or $35, because by the time you take the discounts and all of that, and believe me, that's part of this game. I mean, that's something that I've been kind of surprised by, and it's been intriguing to me that this is a haggling game, and that so many times I'm taking an offer, that I've sent out. I'm running a sale all the time. When I don't run a sale, I notice that I don't get nearly as much activity in my store as when I do run a sale. It's like, so you have to really start up here knowing that you're going to take a price down here probably. So keep that in mind when you're trying to, when you are sourcing things, because it all starts with the sourcing, which of course is the fun part. But now I'm skipping anything, even though I get excited sometimes and I think, gosh, I really like that. Well, maybe I'll buy it for myself, or maybe I'll, try to justify it saying, well, I can use it until it sells, or I do all these kind of mind tricks with my own head sometimes, which is so silly. And focusing on average sales price is just really key, I think, if you want to progress in your business and also just have a real grasp for what you need to be sourcing. Um, the second item that you really, of course, must know at all times, and this is an easy one for the most part, is your fixed monthly cost. Now, it's funny, this can sneak up on you a little bit, especially, a lot of times there's a monthly cost associated with a platform. There's a monthly cost associated with cross-listing services. If you're renting storage space or a warehouse, then you've got fees associated with that. So those are the typical fees that are monthly. And they can kind of sneak up on you. They really can, especially if you're posting in a lot of different places. And I've been really pretty hawkish about looking at that and making sure that that doesn't get away from me. When I first started, I went on to eBay, and then I did Vendoo as my cross-listing service and played around on Poshmark a little bit. For whatever reason, I wasn't a big fan of Poshmark. I didn't like the whole idea of having to share things. It was like you had to pay for that. I felt like my costs were getting away from me before I was making any money. So I basically decided to focus on eBay. Well, now I'm putting my toe in the water a little bit and looking at cross-listing again. I think I might use Nifty. I looked at that. And so these are services that are probably well worth it. Vendoo wasn't my cup of tea, but I think Nifty, I've done some research on that, and that looks a little more interesting to me. And I've heard a lot of good feedback on that. So or recommendations. So I'm going to give that a shot. But just, you need to always keep in mind what your monthly costs are and be very careful about those not getting out of control. You don't want to buy everything. I mean, there's a real market out there. I noticed where they are selling a lot of different things for people. There's, and a lot of people are taking education courses, and I'm a big fan of that. I think it makes sense to take education courses and spend money on your own progress and on your business so you can do better. In fact, I really think that's a smart thing to do, especially when you first start. I think the third number that is really critical, and this one, I kind of got a little worried about one of these numbers a few days ago. You need to keep up with the number of returns you have, the lost packages, and the cancellations. Those numbers are very important. And if you're like, I currently have top seller status, but I have heard about many people that have lost their seller status and have even gone kind of into, they call it eBay jail or whatever, because they got trouble with too many cancellations or too many returns. And because I'm in the clothing business, mostly, I do get returns. I don't get a lot of returns, but I get returns and I get cancellations sometimes. And it's a lot. Normally, it's not, I don't have a lot of control over it. That's what's, I think, upsetting, is when you don't feel like you have control over it. So I think you have to make decisions so that you do feel like you have some control over it. So one of these doesn't get out of hand and get you in trouble with your business. For instance, I had a buyer that she purchased a top. It was a pretty top, and she bought it, and then she basically, as soon as she purchased it, I thought, why didn't you do this before? She sends me a message and says, oh, my address is incorrect. And I thought, oh, here we go. Because that happens sometimes. And I said, you need to, and I instructed her, I said, we need to cancel this order. You need to change your address on eBay and then buy it again. But that's still a cancellation that you have, right? So we go through all this and she purchases it. This is all goes on within like a 48-hour period. She fixes her address and purchases it. And then she gets it and she says it doesn't fit. And that she has a shirt that's really a lot like it. Even though I had all the pictures, I mean, it's kind of like, couldn't you see you had a blouse like it? But anyway, so then she says she wants to return it. So this one customer caused me to have a cancellation and a return. She said, and so I said, well, just say it doesn't fit, because it didn't fit. And so anyway, I had no control over that situation. I tried to help my customer. I tried to give good customer service. But I mean, that just shows you that there's an awful lot that you don't have control over. And if you're in the clothes business, you're going to have returns. And a lot of them are going to be that it doesn't fit. In fact, I have started wiping out entire categories of clothes that I'm not dealing with anymore. The only one that I've had trouble with that I just can't quite give up is shoes, because I tend to, my average sales price is higher for those. So I really don't want to give that up, but shoes, of course, and shoes people seem to know their shoe size it's almost more standard, I think, sometimes than other types of clothing. So anyway, I do think you constantly need to analyze the categories you're selling in. When I first started, I did sell some electronics, just trying to get my average sales price up. And because I was starting to get a lot of returns, I got spooked. I jumped out of it and wasn't really enjoying it anyway, honestly. I thought it's got to be more than just the money. It was a lot of trouble to test the things. I never felt as confident as I needed to, that I knew what I was doing. So I jumped out of electronics. So you'll have to adjust and change things just to keep your returns and your cancellations under control. And in that category, I also put lost packages. Now, I don't know what's happened. This has been one of those weeks. I had that happen with this woman, and then I have a lost package. It says it was delivered, and the guy, I had 100% feedback ratio for 2 years now, and I got my first negative feedback. Not happy about it, especially since he said, sale not completed. That was what he said, and then and that was a negative feedback. And I thought, what does that mean? So I looked up the tracking information. It says that it was delivered. It says he purchased it on the 9th of January, and it was delivered on the 12th of January. So I'm like, okay, was the package stolen? What happened? So now I'm working on trying to resolve that. But obviously, because I've had kind of a tough week so far with weird stuff, I got a little spooked. And I think, you do have to really lean in on this stuff. And I learned I'm trying to remove that negative feedback, even though, it dropped me from 100% to like 99.6%. I thought, well, that's still not bad. And I would still purchase from anybody that had 99.6% as their feedback percentage. But it still irritated me. And I just want it to be right. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted on that and see. Hopefully eBay will take care of me, but I don't really know what to expect. And the fourth number that we really have to lean into is the cost of goods sold. Obviously, on each purchase, you have to really look at that, because let's face it, the cost of the item, is such a big part of the total cost typically, or not always. Sometimes the fees are as much or more. But in order to calculate hit that number of what you want your average profit to be, you've got to know what your cost of goods are on each item. And for most of us, we have a certain amount of money we're going to spend every month on inventory. Now, I don't really watch this as carefully as I should. I do watch it on each purchase, and I always kind of do a mental thing in my head and calculate how much profit I'm going to make on an item before I purchase it. So in that respect, I'm extremely careful and focused on the cost of goods sold. The place where I get in trouble sometimes is my monthly allocation. Sometimes I'll go over on that, or I'll have a big day and get excited because I see a lot of great stuff, and I'll just go crazy and buy more than I anticipated. But fortunately, that's, it's not a big problem for me. But it just, and sometimes too, if I'm doing real well and making a lot of sales, then that encourages me to buy more. But it's so important to rein in on, especially with each item you buy, that cost. Now, I'm not opposed to spending $20 or $30 or $40 on something if I can make the numbers work for me. And of course, if I spend $40, I want to make more than 20 on it. But I'm talking that $20 minimum. I'm talking about more the bread and butter stuff. Because you have to think about, okay, how much of my money am I tying up, and how long is that going to sit? And I think I've said this on another video, but you have to think of all your inventory as cash that's just sitting around your home waiting to be sent out. And that's a good way to have a mental image that'll get you going and keep you from going crazy buying things that are going to sit too long. I think the fifth number that is really, really key is the net profit per month. I do a monthly report and try to figure out how much I'm making each month. And of course, I kind of mentally follow it all through the month. But at the end of the month, I want to tally things up and kind of get a number for myself and see where I am in terms of my goals. Is it going up? Is it going down? How does it compare to last year? And I think that is something you just have to know. And if you're going to be successful, you have got to watch these numbers, and you've got to compare them, to last month, to last year, so that you can see how you're doing and make adjustments, because this business is all about adjustments, just like any business is. Things change, the economy changes, the rules change, the policies of the platforms change. Competition changes, everything does change. And so it's so important to keep up with these numbers. And if you find that you're getting, pushed down on your sales price too much, then that means you've got to get things cheaper. If you find that in order to sell things, you're having to sell for lower prices than maybe you did last year. And I've heard some people saying that they feel like people are much more price conscious. I feel like that too a little bit. I mean, I haven't done enough analysis on it, but it feels like it. I feel like people are just a lot more cost conscious than they were last year. And I just think it's because of the uncertainty that we're going through right now, the political times and everything else. So these are the numbers. And of course, I could have put, average sales through rate, in there, but I feel like everybody just talks about that to death. And that is the most important number, is to know what the sales through rate is on an item before you buy it. How long is it going to sit? How long is it likely to sit? Is it worth it for it to sit for a while because I'm going to make so much on it? Now, that is the sixth item, which I didn't plan on talking about, but we've talked about that so much. I think everybody talks about that because I think that is probably the most important number. Is there a demand, in other words, for this item? And the way you figure that out, of course, is you compare the number of listings and you divide the number of listings by the number that's sold, and typically you do it in a 90-day period, and that will give you that information. So this is a numbers game, like I said, and you have got to focus on it. And if you don't know your average sales price on items, if you don't know the fixed monthly cost, that you need to operate. If you don't know the number of returns and lost packages and cancellations you currently have for the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, if you don't know your cost of goods sold and you're not keeping up with it, and if you don't know your net profit per month, you don't really have a handle on your business. And, granted, not everybody likes the numbers. But if you want to be a business person, you have to do that. And I know it's hard. I like numbers. I've always liked numbers, and I find them fascinating. And so analyzing them and studying them and recording them and documenting them is interesting to me. I'm not always as careful as I need to be, but I do find it fascinating. And I love to make comparisons. And like recently, I have been trying to shift to put more men's clothes into my store because they sell well on eBay especially. And I'm about to open up a Depop. And I keep talking about it. I just need to do it. I wrote down everything and did some research today on Depop and Etsy. Etsy looks a little more expensive than Depop. Depop looks really great as far as the pricing and whatever. I don't know much about the items that sell well there. I got the impression from people I've talked to and things that I've heard that it's more of the trendy stuff, which I'm not sure. Well, I do buy some trendy things, and I might need to lean in on that because it is fun. But I think I get more conservative things and things that are more for my age group or for middle-aged people. And of course, I'm not middle-aged, not unless I'm planning on living over 100, which would be nice. I'm hoping for it, but you never know. So anyway, I appreciate your spending some time with me, and I would love to hear from you about how your numbers are, and if you feel like I've missed some numbers that are important, I'd like to hear that too. Have a great evening or day. Take care. Bye-bye.